From VOA Learning English, this is the Economics Report. The economies of India and China could be larger than many people have thought. A new study for the World Bank now has some experts predicting that China will become the world's largest economy by one measure this year. The same study says that India's economy could pass Japan's as the world's third largest. To get their results, the researchers used a different way to measure the size of a nation's economy. Usually, economists measure by a country's gross domestic product, the value of all goods and services it produces. But some say a different method called purchasing power parity, or PPP, is a better measure. It examines differences in the cost of living among nations. The report is from the International Comparison Program, which was established by the United Nations. The results are based on prices in 2011. Kamel Melahi is a professor at the University of Warwick in Britain. He says PPP provides economists with a way to compare the costs of ordinary things that people need in different countries. Experts then establish a base exchange rate and use it to compare economies. The gross domestic product measure uses market-based exchange rates to compare economies. They are exchange rates paid by travelers and exporters. So the main difference between GDP and PPP is how exchange rates are computed. Greg McBride is Chief Financial Analyst at Bankrate.com. He says PPP is more like an estimate than a measurement. World Bank information shows that China's GDP was about $8 trillion in 2012. That was half the size of the $16 trillion U.S. economy. For VOA Learning English, I'm Alex Villarreal.
From VOA Learning English, this is the Economics Report. Small markets are an important part of South Africa's economy. These businesses offer jobs in a country with an unemployment rate of at least 25%. But immigrants and international businesses are setting up competing stores. That has hurt local traders who run little shops called spazas. John Stiholi has owned his spaza for more than 10 years. It is a small gray building in the Soweto area of the capital, Johannesburg. His small store offers many different kinds of goods, from soap to sweets. Spaza means just getting by. The shops are found in non-white communities where larger, more official stores are not available or are too costly. There are about 100,000 spazas in South Africa. They employ 290,000 people. Research shows that what is called the informal sector in Africa is very large. Informal workers can be self-employed or wage earners. Last year, the African Development Bank said the informal sector provides about 55% of the economic productivity of sub-Saharan Africa. But business has been slow for Mr. Stiholi. He is competing with a nearby store run by a family from Pakistan. South Africa is the only country in the area where refugees have the right to work and can move freely. But reduced profits for native traders and high unemployment rates have caused tensions in the country. In September, more than 100 Somali-owned spazas were attacked during unrest in the city of Port Elizabeth. Rose Nkosi is president of the South African Spaza and Tuck Shop Association. She says the businesses offer the community credit and 24-hour service. The competitors do not. For VOA Learning English, I'm Carolyn Presutti.
From VOA Learning English, this is the Economics Report. The Chinese and Indian foreign ministers have discussed ways to ease tensions and increase economic ties. It was the first high-level meeting between the Asian powers since a new government took power in India. Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi and his Indian counterpart Sushma Swaraj met in the Indian capital, New Delhi. After the meeting, Indian officials said both countries agreed much could be done to improve their economic relationship. Gautam Bambawale of India's Foreign Ministry says China will consider the possibility of expanding economic cooperation between the two countries. Indian officials say more Chinese investment could reduce India's trade deficit with China. That deficit is now more than $30 billion. India says it wants more Chinese investment in roads, ports, and other systems. India also would like increased investment in manufacturing, an area in which India is behind China. Some foreign policy observers in India expect new Prime Minister Narendra Modi to increase economic ties with China to help meet his campaign promise to develop India's economy. But the two countries also have a disputed border in the Himalayas. India accused Chinese troops of entering its territory in the past year, raising tensions. Also, Tibetan refugees in New Delhi demonstrated as the Chinese and Indian officials met. The Chinese premier was the first foreign leader to congratulate Prime Minister Narendra Modi on his election victory. Mr. Modi described China as always a priority in India's foreign policy. For VOA Learning English, I'm Carla Babb.
From VOA Learning English, this is the Economics Report. Many immigrants send small amounts of money, called remittances, home to friends and family. But those small amounts of money together add up to a lot. There are about 200 million international migrants. In 2013, they sent $400 billion back to their home countries. That is much more than official aid to many countries. For some nations, it is the biggest provider of foreign exchange. Jean-Claude Kazadi and his wife Miriam came to the United States from the Democratic Republic of Congo. They quickly began sending money home after they arrived. Mr. Kazadi is a doctor who works on HIV/AIDS for Catholic Relief Services in Maryland. He knows the $400 he sends to his parents every month is important. Economist Adolfo Barajas of the International Monetary Fund has studied remittances for 10 years. He says remittance amounts increased by 7 times from 1990 to 2010. Mr. Barajas says a huge migration has driven this flow of money to countries around the world. Economists have said that remittances help families who receive them by increasing their income. But there is a concern that the income into a national economy will cause its money to increase in value. In turn, a country's exports can become more costly and less competitive. Dilip Ratha is a remittance expert with the World Bank. He says remittances help reduce poverty and provide investment money for business, education, and health. Remittances can provide money to countries in conflict when private investors leave. For VOA Learning English, I'm Carolyn Presutti.
From VOA Learning English, this is the Economics Report. For years, Somalia has been called a failed state. Piracy, poverty, and terrorism have been problems in the country for a long time. But recent improvements suggest that the country is taking steps toward lasting security. Somali officials say a stronger economy is extremely important to peace. In April, Somali officials traveled to the United Arab Emirates, hoping to attract foreign investment. The event, called the Somalia Investment Summit, was held in Dubai. The goal was to present Somalia as a good place to invest. Somalia is still dealing with the effects of a 20-year civil war. Foreign intervention is the main cause of increased security in the country. Over the past year, African Union troops helped drive al-Shabaab militants from major cities. And international naval forces have sharply decreased pirate attacks. But Ali Mohammed Getty warns that the results of these efforts could be temporary. Mr. Getty is the former Prime Minister of Somalia's transitional federal government. He says poverty must be ended. He says poverty is the reason young people join al-Shabaab. The chairman of the Somali Economic Forum, Hassan Dude, agrees. He says the pull of illegal activity, such as piracy, is strong when there are no jobs available. Although conditions in Somalia are improving, safety threats remain. Somalia lacks a central government. Corruption is common. And the workforce is largely unskilled. These problems concern possible investors. Also, there are no secure legal safeguards for foreign investors. Currently, the United Arab Emirates, Oman, and Yemen are the top investors in Somalia. For VOA Learning English, I'm Carla Babb.
From VOA Learning English, this is the Economics Report. On May 30th, a court in Cambodia found guilty 23 clothing workers and union members. They were arrested during violent protests in January in which at least 4 workers were killed. However, the court immediately suspended the sentences. International companies had watched the case closely. The defendants were charged with a number of offenses, including incitement and property damage. Legal experts said the trial did not meet international guidelines. They said the judge barred defendants from speaking or questioning witnesses. The court gave the defendants sentences from 1 to 4.5 years. But it then ruled to suspend the sentences to time already served. Unrest about pay has resulted in deadly protests in Cambodia. The monthly minimum wage currently stands at $100. The garment workers want that raised to $160. There is also a disputed law related to trade unions that the government wants to pass by the end of the year. A delegation of international clothing companies recently spoke to top government officials. Representatives from H&M, Puma, and The Gap said they would find other sources for their products unless worker conditions improved. The garment industry in Cambodia employs about 600,000 workers. The brands offer to pay more to factories that employ workers. But they say the Cambodian government must also act by not using violence or the courts against protesters. The clothing or garment manufacturing industry is an important part of Cambodia's economy, providing about $5.5 billion in exports last year. For VOA Learning English, I'm Alex Villarreal.
From VOA Learning English, this is the Economics Report. Many migrant women go to work in private homes as cleaners, cooks, and caretakers. They are called domestic workers. Recently, several incidents in Asia and the Middle East have brought attention to abuse of such workers. A court in Malaysia sentenced a man and his wife to death in March for starving to death a 26-year-old domestic worker from Indonesia. Another Indonesian maid says she was beaten by her employers in Hong Kong. The 23-year-old spent almost a month in a hospital. Pictures of the injuries and reports of her 20-hour workdays led to protests across Indonesia. The International Labor Organization is a United Nations agency. It estimates 50 million migrants are employed as domestic workers. About 5 million of them are Indonesian women. they sent almost $10 billion back to their families at home. Audrey Guichon is with the group Anti-Slavery International. She says the foreign labor program in the Middle East, called the kafala system, leaves workers at risk for abuse. In Saudi Arabia, 42 Indonesians are awaiting death sentences. Half of them are believed to be domestic workers. Darsim Tawar faced a death sentence in 2011 for killing her Saudi employer. She argued that he was raping her at the time. Officials changed her sentence only after her supporters paid the family of the dead man. In April, the Indonesian government negotiated better conditions for Indonesians working in Saudi Arabia. The agreement signals the end of Indonesia's 3-year suspension of labor exports to Saudi Arabia. However, critics say Indonesia must do more. For VOA Learning English, I'm Laurel Bowman.
From VOA Learning English, this is the Economics Report. For many years, immigrants have sought better lives for themselves in New York City. Now, a new study says that immigrants also have helped the city's economy remain strong. New York is in many ways a city of immigrants. The mayor's office says the group makes up more than 40% of New York's population. The Americas Society Council of the Americas, or ASCOA, is a group that explores issues affecting the Americas. It supported a recent study about how immigrants affect New York City's economy. The study looked at immigration records and neighborhood police reports between 1990 and 2010. The report's author, Jacob Vigdor, says New York City's economy and the quality of life improved during that period. He says immigrants move into aging, troubled neighborhoods because housing is less costly. Then he says the new residents improve the area. He says, in turn, crime rates drop. Robert Sampson is a social policy professor at Harvard University. He says immigrants who take risks to get to America are less likely to take part in crime and more likely to work hard. Immigrant businesses also help to drive growth in New York. ASCOA's Kate Brick says immigrants are more willing to accept lower-paying, less desirable jobs than non-immigrants. Jacob Vigdor says all immigrants help support the economy in some way by paying sales tax and property taxes. ASCOA hopes the report will influence other U.S. cities to welcome immigrants in ways that help everyone. For VOA Learning English, I'm Carolyn Persutti.
From VOA Learning English, this is the Economics Report. The head of the U.S. Central Bank has told Congress that the economy is improving after very slow growth in the first 3 months of the year. U.S. Federal Reserve Chair Janet Yellen's report came soon after the government announced April's employment numbers. They showed the biggest monthly gain in 2 years. Ms. Yellen's comments were hopeful. She said she expects economic activity to expand at a faster rate this year than it did last year. However, the central bank chief remained concerned about employment and international tensions. She said the threat of conflict in other countries and growing financial problems in some developing countries could hurt the world economy. The Federal Reserve, or Fed for short, has been cutting back its efforts to support the economy. The Fed has reduced its government bond buying activities. Fed purchases went from $85 billion 5 months ago to about $45 billion now. Bond buying by the central bank puts more money into the economy, and it has helped keep interest rates near historically low levels. This program, called quantitative easing, is set to end in the last 3 months of this year. But Janet Yellen said borrowing rates would remain low for, in her words, a considerable amount of time. Earlier, the U.S. Labor Department said the economy added 288,000 jobs in April. That brought the unemployment rate to its lowest level in 5 years. The employment news balanced the Commerce Department's announcement that economic growth was very slow in the first 3 months of the year. For VOA Learning English, I'm Alex Villarreal.
From VOA Learning English, this is the Economics Report. Low-cost health insurance is soon to be available to students and small business workers in Senegal through a World Bank program. Nearly 2/3 of all Senegalese are unable to get health insurance. Many fall into debt when they get sick or injured. The World Bank Group's International Finance Corporation is working with the International Center for Development and Research to provide the insurance. The bank says it plans to offer low-cost private health insurance plans in Senegal as part of the area's first private copay program. Tifan Kren is an operations officer at the IFC. He says health insurance through private companies is very costly in the West African nation. He says about 65% of people in Senegal do not have any health care coverage. In Senegal, only civil service employees or workers at companies with more than 50 employees are able to get health care coverage. Mr. Kren says many people take out loans to pay for health care. He says this can empty a family's savings. The IFC says that it will work with 6 private Senegalese insurance companies to share the costs of health risks. It says it will offer micro health care products at well below normal cost. Mr. Kren says the plans will cost as little as $16 per year, although plans that include hospital visits will cost up to $60 per year. Students can get basic health care for just $3 per year. Members will have to pay 20% of usual treatment costs. Mr. Kren says the pilot program plans to target around 108,000 people during the first year in Dakar. For VOA Learning English, I'm Laurel Bowman.